Welcome to the Country Watch Political Intelligence Briefing Quick Hits, a weekly briefing of hot stories across the world in brief. I'm Denise Youngblood Coleman, the Editor-in-Chief and Senior International Affairs Analyst at Country Watch. This week, the featured country is the United States. Since September 2021, Senate Republicans have been blocking the bill that would have funded the government past the latest deadline and suspended the U.S. debt ceiling. On October 6, 2021, despite communicating intransigence for a week over the debt ceiling issue and refusing to help pass legislation on a bipartisan basis, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell acquiesced to the realities of a looming economic catastrophe and indicated he would support a temporary measure to raise the debt ceiling limit through December 2021. McConnell proposed a deal that would allow Democrats to use normal procedures to pass an emergency debt limit extension at a fixed dollar amount to cover current spending levels into December. On October 7th, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer announced a temporary agreement had been reached between Democrats and Republicans to keep the United States from defaulting on its debt on the October 18th, 2021 deadline. Following debate, the Senate passed the short-term debt ceiling bill, moving the new debt limit deadline to December 2021 with the assistance from 11 Republicans. With the Senate voting to avert default in this instance, further uncertainty would invariably surface in December without further action. Nevertheless, the temporary solution in October would provide Democrats with breathing room to pursue President Joe Biden's two-track domestic agenda of bipartisan infrastructure and the broader Build Back Better initiatives. Speaking of those two-track domestic agenda items, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has said that her chamber would be taking up the two bills only with assurances that both bills will be passed. At stake would be the $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure deal that passed the Senate already with the support of every Democrat and 19 Republicans. That bill included $550 billion in new funding for roads, public transport, rural broadband, and other infrastructure. Also at stake would be the $3.5 trillion reconciliation package to fund President Joe Biden's domestic agenda. Included in Biden's Build Back Better package to be passed through budget reconciliation would be investments in childcare, paid family leave, free community college, and climate change mitigation. With the bipartisan infrastructure bill becoming inextricably linked to the reconciliation package, and with the internecine battles emerging between the progressive and moderate wings of the Democratic Party, there was some skepticism about the passage of the legislation. But with the debt ceiling crisis possibly averted, at least for now, there would be some breathing room in the Senate to refocus on getting the president's domestic agenda passed into legislation. Staying in the Western Hemisphere in Brazil, my focus is on President Jair Bolsonaro's continued attempt to strain constitutional norms in order to hold on to power in Brazil. Of concern were Bolsonaro's attacks on Brazil's electronic voting system, claiming without evidence that it was beset by widespread fraud. It was clear that Bolsonaro was sowing doubts about Brazil's electronic voting system while suggesting that there might be no presidential election in 2022 as scheduled as a result. Bolsonaro has seen cataclysmic erosion of political support, partly as a result of his COVID-19 denialist pandemic management style that contributed to the deaths of more than 500,000 people. Other causes for his collapsing popularity have included the still sluggish economic recovery, as well as the plethora of scandals and corruption schemes surrounding Bolsonaro and his sons. Recent polls in Brazil show Bolsonaro with a dismal approval rating of about 23%. Moreover, former left-wing President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, known as President Lula, or former President Lula, who is expected to contest the upcoming presidential election, retained his strong support and popularity across Brazil. With Bolsonaro trailing former President Lula in hypothetical matchups and polling data, it was conceivable that he was setting the foundation in place for extra-constitutional means to hold on to power. The new playbook for autocratic right-wing leaders across the world has been to weaponize disinformation and undermine confidence in their country's electoral systems in order to protest election results unfavorable to them. The new posture was that elections and election results should only be respected when they produce favorable winners. Should the right wing be at risk of losing an election, then the commitment to an electoral democracy would evaporate, thus triggering efforts to undermine democratic institutions and to discredit democracy. The question at hand, would Brazilian democracy prevail in the face of his onslaught? Brazilians were indicating that they would not relinquish democracy easily by taking to the streets in Brazil to protest against Bolsinaro. Moving across the Atlantic to Germany, as I mentioned last week, the Social Democrats have won the most seats in the election to the Bundestag, a plurality, but not a majority. Nevertheless, beating Angela Merkel's center-right CDU-CSU, now with Armin Laschet at the helm. Also faring well were a number of smaller parties eager to play kingmaker roles. At the top of that list would be the Greens and the FDP. There's a strong possibility of a traffic light coalition composed of the Social Democrats, or SPD, known for their red insignia, the FDP with their yellow, and the Greens with their green respective insignias. On October 6th, Germany moved closer to the so-called traffic light government headed by Social Democrats and Olaf Scholz, when the Greens and the FDP said that they would work with the Social Democrats to try to form a coalition. The decision by the Greens and the FDP to prioritize coalition talks with the Social Democrats instead of the CDU and the CSU was a blow to Laschet. Nevertheless, Laschet, who led the Conservatives to their worst ever election result, insisted he could yet become chancellor. This may be bordering on delusional, given the fact that the Bavarian CSU and coalition partners were making it clear that Scholz and the Social Democrats had earned the right to try to form a government. Laschet was also delivered another blow when officials from his own CDU called on him to accept the party's loss. In the interim, Merkel would remain at the helm as chancellor. Once the coalition building process is over, the chance of a future Chancellor Scholz is higher than that of a Chancellor Laschet. Staying in Europe, a court in France has sentenced former French President Nicolas Sarkozy to a one-year prison sentence for illegally financing his 2012 re-election bid. This sentence came 7 months after Sarkozy received a 3-year jail term for corruption and influence peddling. Sarkozy has appealed both verdicts. He may also be able to escape time in prison for both cases, as the former French president may be allowed to serve his sentences under electronic surveillance at home. Moving east to Japan, Fumio Kishida has won the leadership contest to succeed Yoshihide Suga, who announced earlier that he was stepping down ahead of elections scheduled for later in the year. The leadership race was a close one, but it ended with the former foreign minister who was called for a politics of generosity emerging as the winner. Kishida has touted his effort to bring then United States President Barack Obama to Hiroshima, his hometown, for a historic visit, and has asserted that the abolishment of nuclear weapons was his life's work. Kishida was confirmed as the new prime minister in a vote in parliament on October 4th, 2021. His first order of business would be to lead the Liberal Democratic Party into the general elections. In Tunisia, President Kais Saied appointed Najla Bouden Rubdani as the new prime minister and the first female prime minister of Tunisia. The move came 2 months after the president removed the previous prime minister, Hichem Michichi, and suspended parliament while consolidating his executive power. A university engineer who has worked with the World Bank, Bouden has little governing experience, but given that President Saied himself is a government outsider with a penchant for going after old-style politics and attacking corruption, Bouden was perhaps a consistent selection. A couple of other developments. A month after the coup that ousted President Alpha Conde from office in Guinea, the coup leader, Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya, has been confirmed as the interim president. Also, Mohamed Bovogui, a former civil servant and agribusiness expert, has been named prime minister. In the Philippines, in addition to President Rodrigo Duterte running for vice president in the next elections, the contest for his job was turning out to be a wide field, including Senator turned boxer Manny Pacquiao, Duterte's stalwart Ferdinand Marcos Jr., the son and namesake of the former dictator of the Philippines, and Duterte's own nemesis, Vice President Leni Robredo. In the next weeks, I'll be covering further developments related to the fate of the debt ceiling crisis, as well as the movement on President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure package and the Build Back Better agenda. I'll also be looking at the Senate report, which gives new details of Trump's efforts to use the Justice Department to overturn the 2020 elections. Other items I'll be covering: the inauguration of the Ethiopian Prime Minister amidst the ongoing Tigrayan crisis, the arrest of former Georgian President Saakashvili, elections in the Czech Republic and Iraq, and the Taliban's desire to achieve international legitimacy and recognition, and the West's efforts to use that leverage against the Taliban. I'm also looking at the proposed government in exile as related to the post-exit scenario in Afghanistan, as well as a looming economic crisis. I also have some thoughts on the US military engagement and foreign policy attached to Afghanistan. A lot of this coverage can be accessed via my comprehensive Afghanistan withdrawal report called Sunsets in the Graveyard of Empires, which will soon be available for purchase from the Country Watch website at www.countrywatch.com. Thank you for your time. Have a great day, and remember, now more than ever, we live in an interconnected world.